We are back. I'm Mr. Worldwide, and it's 2025. Let's get to it. Welcome. Another fabulous episode of IBF On Demand. I'm your international host and voice of S&OP, Eric Wilson. You can find me at eric@ibf.org. That's eric@ibf.org. First of all, thank you, 2024. A successful year, a lot of great content. And by the way, you can find me on LinkedIn. Follow me there. On YouTube, follow me there. Wherever you get your podcast, follow me there. We actually have a LinkedIn channel as well, especially for this IBF On Demand. Follow me there. Basically, hit the subscribe button on anything you see on the internet, or if a pop-up shows up on your phone or computer, just hit the accept. I'm sure nothing's going to go wrong by that. So just accept and subscribe to everything and you'll be fine. I want to thank Arkiva. Make sure you're following them as well. Arkiva, driving business transformation by solving what others cannot. Fabulous sponsor, been around since the very beginning, continuing into 2025 now. Check them out as well. Thank you, Arkiva. And once in a while, IBF. This is IBF On Demand, so we're the first three letters of this. IBF has a lot going on in the near future. We do the town halls. We have a lot of upcoming conferences. It's going to be a Miami demand planning boot camp coming up. In Chicago, we're going to be doing something on S&OP. So those are just the next couple months from when I'm recording this. Check out ibf.org. Check out the website. There's a lot going on, so you can find out more information there. Just take a moment for a little bit of a flex here. So during the Christmas season, I got a very special Christmas gift. Thank you very much, April. So I'm very humbled, but still, it is a little bit of a flex. So you'll actually be able to see it in the background here over the next few podcasts. So got a great artwork done with kind of a half me, half Captain America. If you know, you know. So this is a great 3D art piece. You're going to need some special glasses to be able to see it properly, but thank you. It's a very talented artist. Very humbled to be able to have this now back here and then on my wall when I get back to my house. So thank you very much, April. So I do accept gifts, and if you want to send me anything, come on. One other thing I want to mention is I am working on a new book, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be on cultural complexities of the global S&OP process, or really any process for that matter. I'm doing a lot of research now. I'm hoping to have something by the end of 2025 be able to be out. So keep your eye on that. But more importantly, I'm looking for help. So stay tuned at the end of this podcast. I'm going to give you some information on how you can help and how you might actually want to be part of it if you'd like to as well. So stay tuned at the end of the podcast for that. On the topic of global, more specifically global S&OP, that's what we're actually going to look at today. We're going to talk a little bit about a global S&OP process. S&OP, once began as a localized, very tactical approach, has really transformed over the last, decades into a critical framework that's really harmonizing regional differences and driving unified strategies across multiple geographies now. So across multiple countries, it's really blending them together into a unified type of strategy that's running companies. S&OP has really stepped up in being able to do that. Multi-international companies have realized that traditional planning methods, ways they used to do supply chain and running their business, once was specific for specific areas and regions, are no longer sufficient to manage the complexities of today's global marketplace. So we need to not only act, but we also need to think and now plan globally as well. That's where global S&OP comes in. Now, fundamentally, the steps of an S&OP process are consistent across both local or global businesses. I don't care if you're just in one operating in one small area, or if you're operating globally, the fundamentals of the S&OP really are the same. Mature S&OP processes typically consist of the same basic 4 or 5 steps. Product review, where you're getting your brand strategy, your demand review, which is really your channel strategy. It's more than just a forecast. Your supply or resource review, which is really your optimization strategy, and then an executive, all of it culminates into an executive review where that comes out with your business strategy. It's all about strategy, whether product, demand, supply, optimization, resource, and executive. Those are our 4 main steps in any mature S&OP process. Now, what we see, though, is in a global S&OP usually introduces at least one additional step, the global roll-up. And that is where you're going to bring a lot of the regional into the global enterprise type of context for the organization. This extra step involves consolidating your S&OP information at one or more of the steps I talked about in a traditional S&OP process, and provides more of a holistic view of the organization's either product, demand, operations, or overall strategy and direction for the organization. Where we roll it up, that goes back to my favorite answer. It depends. It truly does depend. From my experience, global S&OP really lacks a universal type solution. There is not really a one-size-fits-all. So what we're going to do today is kind of unpack that a little bit and talk about some of the ways that I've seen, I've done, or I'm working with organizations and they're doing. So I'm bringing a lot of what is in the marketplace right now and what we're seeing as far as global, where the extra steps happen, where the roll-up is, some nuances between them, and sharing that with you then so you can get an understanding of where you might fit and why there's different ways of being able to do it. And perhaps maybe you're starting one, how you can start your journey then as well. Generally, there's 2 main processes. Either you're going to have a standardized products that are sold globally. So this is the kind of company, one set of products sold internationally. Some companies offer the same products worldwide, and they want to maintain consistency of their offerings no matter where it's provided. The other is more regional specific type of products that are really catered towards local requirements or a local type of audience. Other companies are tailoring the products to meet the regional needs or a specific area's needs, such as different packaging, labeling. There may be regulatory standards or just certain types of cultural needs that happen in certain areas that they want to be able to kind of lean into or be able to sell into then as well. So those really dictate how you really start to break out your S&OP processes, generally is what we've seen. This will actually lead to one of 3 different approaches. It's either going to be more of a centralized type of approach, a decentralized approach, or a hybrid approach. Each varies in its approach to decision making and planning across the business. And what you're generally doing is balancing global uniformity and a local responsiveness, because that is ultimately the next pieces that are really making the determination of how you're going to structure. Because there is not only the demand side of things, but there is the operational side of things in an S&OP process as well. So we have the S part, sales, but there is also the operation. And if you remember when I talked about demand, supply, product, and executive, demand was really your channel strategy. The channel strategy is, do we want the local responsiveness? Do we want to really meet local regional needs? Do we need to? Is there certain aspects we need to be, from an S part, local? From an operational point of view, the same kind of considerations are looking at. The scalability of your business. How much you're going to look at optimizing where you're producing, and where it's most efficient to produce. And that's not only the manufacturing. You may look at local manufacturing may be more optimal, but also look at logistics side of things, the transportation needs, regulatory needs when it comes to import and exporting different parts of your supply chain as well. All those come into an optimization problem that determines where it's best to put your product, house your product, store your product, manufacturing your product. All those go into the operational side of things. So looking at the demand side and the operational side, I said it's going to lend itself to three general approaches: centralized, decentralized, and hybrid then as well. So looking at each one of those a little bit more. First is going to be your centralized structure. Your centralized structure is a concept in which all decision making and planning and really your strategy takes place at an organization's globally, or a centralized type of hub. So here we're going to be looking at a regional maybe demand, but then it's quickly rolled up into a centralized demand and a centralized supply and a centralized executive. So a central team was responsible for formulating the overall strategies for the organization. So demand is going to be my channel strategy. So that is a centralized type of channel strategy. Where we're going to sell it, how we're going to sell it, where we're going to place it and be able to increase our market share, how we're going to break into different markets. Those are all centralized type of strategies. We also have a centralized type of optimization strategy then as well. So our resources, our placement of inventory, our movement of goods, our manufacturing, those become centralized decisions and a strategy then as well. And obviously we already mentioned products. So the overall strategy, product, demand channel, brand, optimization, replenishment, those are centralized across all the regional units. That becomes a centralized process. So then regionalized teams simply are carrying out those plans. So what we see at a regional is where we see the S&OEs. S&OE, sales and operation execution, or TAC, tracking, action, collaboration, those become regionalized, more of management of the plans and strategies. So those become more of a weekly regionalized plan. And one of the things when I talked about demystifying S&OE, it's a past podcast, I really went in detail about what an S&OE is. And S&OE is not necessarily a one type of meeting or one type of step that occurs on a weekly basis. That generally becomes more regionalized, and you may have multiple S&OE processes, and they are carrying out the unified strategy plans to the guidelines they're given. They're looking at where things are outside of norms, outside of control limits. They're executing and adapting to the reality they're seeing locally, and they're being very flexible to the changes, usually though within some type of guidelines that have been given. A S&OP playbook, a certain types of buffers that were provided, whatever it may be, that's given at the global level. Regional levels are more of the management of those plans and what happens. And as I said, in any good S&OE, S&OP process, as exceptions are rolled up to the global level on a weekly level, those become part of a new plan and adjusted, but those are integrated globally, not just regionally then. So that becomes really scenario one, which is a global everything pretty much. So for this, consider the global business that maybe has 5 manufacturing processes across 4 different continents. Each factory has the capability of creating about 80% of the overall product line. So each different unique manufacturing site can produce almost anything that the company, the whole entire portfolio. The remaining 20% produced at specific facilities due to unique requirements. Now we have to manage where that 80% of our product is being produced. Is it going to be produced in this continent or this continent? Where is it being sold? Looking at transportation, looking at different exchange rates, looking at warehousing, looking at different regulatory, looking at capacity, looking at labor rates, looking at all these different factors, we now can make a global plan to figure out not only our demand, but our supply then as well. That's where it really lends itself the best to. The other side of it is going to be scenario 2, which is a decentralized type of structure. A decentralized structure provides extensive autonomy or freedom to the regions or specific types of countries. Each region will manage its own S&OP process for the most part, and most of its decision making and strategies within a certain more broad guidelines from the enterprise or company. So the way this is going to look is probably more of a regional demand, as well as that then goes into a regional supply. And typically you'll have a final category or roll up or regional roll up into an enterprise view before you get to a centralized type of executive S&OP. This is a lot of the more common types of pre-S&OP type steps, where you have autonomous or regionalized type S&OPs that do their own demand S&OP, will do their own supply S&OP. Those will then figure out their imbalances. They're coming up with a unified type of a plan that then they'll bring in with other types of unified plans from other regions. Those are then rolled up into one enterprise view to be able to present monthly at an executive S&OP forum, where they then can look at more of a longer term strategies, the business plan that then guides the decision making at the regional S&OP and regional views. So the regional teams develop and implement plans tailored to their specific markets, their specific needs. They'll look at the pre-S&OP really to bring, to aggregate those plans, or there is the times where you have some shared resources, where companies have shared assets, shared resources that may work across the different regions. Not as much as what we looked at from a scenario 1, but we do have some shared resources, whether it be some transportation or some manufacturing. Here, we're going to address those at usually some type of pre-S&OP, or that's a consolidated view of the demand and supply that's coming out of the regions. At the executive then is where we're looking at overarching corporate objectives and provide a common direction that the company is operating off of. So here, consider a business that sells a wide range of products in tiny amounts to dispersed markets. Due to the specific customer needs and the needs to maintain a product to machine type of linkage because of either lead times or cost or some other type of aspects, global planning is not viable as much within the acceptable lead times or cost or resource constraints. So therefore, a more decentralized approach works better for these types of companies. So that's when you're looking at more of a decentralized type of setup. There is one other setup, and that's the all of the above, but there's one specific kind of approach that I'm going to mention in this. All of it kind of fits into the hybrid structure. And yes, hybrid structure is exactly what it talks about. It's a little bit of that, maybe a little bit of this, and kind of putting it together. It incorporates really features from both the centralized and decentralized type of processes, trying to strike that magic balance between global alignment, regional flexibility, optimizing my operations, but still maximizing my sales and demand. All of that kind of comes into a hybrid type approach. And yes, most companies generally fall into some type of hybrid because they're not pure one way, pure other way. That said, there is something to said for being more centralized or more decentralized. One thing I'm going to look at, though, is a certain version of the decentralized, kind of the hybrid approach that I want to kind of emphasize. Many times I know you kind of think of centralized as the opposite of decentralized. Well, there is a form of a hybrid that is almost the opposite kind of a decentralized without being completely centralized. Here, you're looking at a centralized demand and supply. So opposed to a decentralized demand, decentralized supply, and then we aggregate up to the aggregated executive form or aggregated type of decision making happen for more of the longer term or broader type of direction for the company. Here, we're looking at a centralized demand and centralized supply. So it's very similar to the centralized structure where things are coming out for how we're going to go into different markets, where we're going to produce this, where we're going to place our inventory. All those become centralized type of strategies. Then what we'll do is disaggregate those to the regional view. What the regional view, though, is we give a certain level of autonomy still to the regional levels of what they can do, what their P&L looks like at the regional levels. Here, that becomes a disaggregated to a regional view for almost a reconciliation, but also an approval type of process, where the regional views have the autonomy to be able to push back on the central views based on, here's what you're seeing as far as market, but localized demand says, no, I really don't see the capabilities of being able to do it because the local market really needs this and needs that. Or from an operational standpoint, looking at costs, it's going to not be efficient to be able to do this, or it's going to be, we're going to have to be able to do this to be able to do that. So this becomes really the yes, but part of an S&OP process where the centralized produces a strategy and the regional disaggregates to the regional and they push back saying, hey, this is what we can do. So a pre-S&OP steps really become the approval process for the centralized strategies. Then that generally goes back to a centralized where the decision-making forum for a executive S&OP becomes the strategy, the centralized demand, centralized supply wants this, the regionalized say this. How do we reconcile those together or make a decision at the executive level of which one we're going to do? So that becomes more of a hybrid type of structure. I said, in essence, it's almost the opposite view where you're starting central and then going centralized, then going decentralized versus everything's decentralized, then you centralize only at the last step. So here we're developing a global strategic planning, giving the organization's unified direction. Regional teams make operational tactical decisions at a longer time horizon that meet the planning hierarchy and tailor tactics to local markets, local operational needs at the planning level then as well. So consider a corporation that sells most of its product locally, but has manufacturing flexibility. That has more manufacturing flexibility and shares resources in almost a matrix type of organizations. So here we see maybe a centralized global S&OP process, but we also have globalized supply chain, but we also have regionalized supply chain. It's a matrix type of organization. There's generally a lot more dotted lines we see here as well. So it's that type of organization. There's a variety of methods that can produce products, and sales can occur across markets. countries based in specialization and profitability. There's individual P&Ls that we're looking at and measuring. That becomes the ideal scenario for this type of hybrid. No matter where you go with your global S&OP, the one thing we see is one size definitely does not fit all the different types of variants out there. I would actually love to hear from you what yours might look like. I not only want to hear from you about this, but I want to hear what global S&OP looks like. That is really what I want to talk about, because one of the things that impacts a global S&OP process is going to be the culture. Different cultures is actually going to lend itself to how that structure is. A very hierarchical culture is going to be more centralized. So if you're looking, not saying a one size fits all even within a region or country, but typically if you're looking at some of the Central Europe, it's going to be more hierarchical versus a lot of the Asians. Once again, not saying one size fits all. You will find nuances in any region or any country, but typically it's more egalitarian or more, that's going to be more hierarchical versus you're looking at, say, a Northern Europe is going to be more egalitarian. So that's what you typically see. Culture is going to impact the way you structure. That actually is going to be part of my new book. I want to look at a new book looking at cultural complexities in a global S&OP. And I said, if you stay to the end of this podcast, guess what? We're close to the end of the podcast. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the end of my new book and how you can get involved. Cultural complexities in a global S&OP process is important, and how different cultures come to, the S&OP decision making, come to collaboration, looking at what consensus mean. I said the hierarchy is going to matter. These things are different between cultures. And we're not talking a lot about it, but obviously it has an impact. It has an impact that is going unmentioned, and I want to have a little discussion about it. Right now, I'm doing a lot of research. Most of this book's going to be based on observational research and a lot of secondary type of research that's already out there that I've been aware of for years, that I'm doing a little bit more diving into now as well. So with the observational research, I need to do a lot of interviews, multiple interviews. This is where I could use your help. I'm looking for people that are in any type of global, or necessarily don't have to be global. I can interview you of how locally you be able to look at collaboration, look at decision making, look at the structure of your S&OP process. That is what I'm looking for. Especially if you're on a global, I want to hear from you. So reach out to me. I want your story. I want your insights. I need the data. So please reach out to me. Eric@ibf.org. 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 It's not that difficult. It's 9 letters. So reach out to me there. You may actually end up in the book if you'd like as well. But like I said, I'm looking for those stories, looking for insights, looking for data. I need interviews. If you're involved in an S&OP process, have information, have any kind of stories about it, that's what I'm looking for. The way two different cultures came together and it was a success, or challenges that you see, or just uniqueness that you believe is going unrecognized and not spoken about. We want to have that discussion. So please reach out to me, Eric@ibf.org. I want to hear from you. Well, that's a wrap. I'm going to go plan my next international trip. By the way, I'm coming to Spain in March, so follow me on LinkedIn if you want to learn more about that. My name is Eric. You can find me at eric@ibf.org. That's eric@ibf.org. Thank you, Arkiva, for driving business transformation by solving what others cannot. Thank you, Arkiva. And by the way, there's a lot of other events going on. I said there's going to be a Miami demand planning boot camp, and there's one on S&OP in Chicago. Those are coming in February and March. I'm not sure when you're watching this podcast, but even if you miss those, we have more going on in April, in May, in June, in August, in October, in November. Across the globe, we are global, so check those out at ibf.org. Let me know if you can help me with my new book. Love for you to reach out to me there, or just hear about your global S&OP process. I hope today's information resonated with you, wherever you are, global, locally. And remember, as we start 2025, I know we're 5 years away from a certain global event that occurred back in 2020, but still, don't forget, wash your hands,